Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, or whatever time period is in the world wherever you are, and welcome to the second episode of Cainite Conversations, and it's been quite a while since we have done this. It's almost a year, actually. I did say it was going to be a irregular mini-series, but I didn't think it was going to be that irregular. Anyway, a lot has happened since then, so as a reminder for anybody who's new, who hasn't done these before, you've just forgotten, Cainite Conversations is an irregular mini-series that I want to jump in and out of every so often. Where I grab somebody from the tabletop role-playing game community and we talk about, well, tabletop role-playing games and anything and everything else in between. And I am exceptionally excited to have who I believe is a remarkable person in our community, somebody who's made quite a lot of a name for themselves over the last few months, and it is the one, the only, Sara Thompson. Thank you ever so much for coming along.
Hi, thank you for asking me to come on. It's been a while since I've done any interviews or podcasts. This is fun.
That's great. Well, we're both in a similar boat here because I haven't done interviews for a while and you haven't done this for a while. So what could possibly go wrong? So for anybody who doesn't know who are you and what is it that you do? Or rather, what is it that you are known for?
Okay, as you said, I'm Sara Thompson. I work in the TTRPG sphere, mainly from a disability inclusion and representation angle. I've worked and I'm known for the combat wheelchair for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, which is a homebrewed, free-to-use item out there on the internet. And I am also known for working on the official Witcher tabletop role-playing game by RTalsorianGames. I also helped introduce wheelchairs and cyberchairs into Cyberpunk RED, which is also by RTalsorianGames. I have worked with Paizo on disability inclusion for both Starfinder and Pathfinder. And I've also worked on the official Hellboy role-playing game. And at the moment, I'm currently working on a personal project, which is, at the moment, the working title is Disability and the Witcher TTRPG. Haven't got an official name just yet, but probably will be in the future. That comes out at the end of June this year.
That is, well, I personally believe that is a lot of awesome stuff. And there's a very loud minority that would think otherwise, but we'll get onto them later, I'm sure. A totally unoriginal question, but how did you exactly get into playing tabletop role-playing games?
I played it once in high school, and it was D&D 4th edition, and opinions on 4th edition aside, I didn't have a great time, and then got back into it in 6th form, which for anybody who's not in the UK, that's like your 2 years of school before you go to university. So I got back into it then with a partner at the time because they were really, really passionate about D&D. I got back into it and then we joined a university club, a social club, which was all about board games and LARPing, and they would, buy games for us to play, and you could find people who are like-minded, and that kind of really got me into D&D. My first official campaign was in university, because until then I'd just been playing one-shots with friends from school, and then I did a couple of campaigns while I was at uni, and also set up my own home game, which has been going on for over 2 years now, a campaign, which has been a lot of fun. And especially last year, I kind of branched out more into different tabletop games, which is, how I got into The Witcher and Cyberpunk and things like Pathfinder and Starfinder, as well as a few other more indie tabletop games. So that's kind of how I got into it. And yeah, never really looked back since. It's kind of become a big part of my life now.
Yeah, it's kind of something that those who know you, that's like your, I don't know, in air quotes, your brand is kind of devoted at the moment to two things, tabletop and witcher facts, and I just love the energy that you have on both of these. Just to rewind the story just a little bit, you mentioned at at university that the club, they buy games for you.
Yeah, it was a university club, and the university themselves would have a budget for it, as they did with like every society. So like, they had other societies to do with sports, and they'd buy sports kits and things for people to use. And basically it would fund things like buying copies of the D&D books so that people who came could actually have a physical book to use during games. And other board games as well.
That's pretty awesome.
And yeah, like they would kind of finance having like actual gaming tables and stuff for people who wanted to play Magic the Gathering or Pokemon card games and things like that. So yeah, it basically they had a budget to try and make sure that there was enough there that they could introduce people to like kind of the basics on everything. And we even had like a box that was full of like spare dice sets that the university would get for us, and people would also donate their old dice sets if they didn't need or want them anymore.
That is incredibly wholesome.
People could get
I can just think of so many people who it is to just prick up just a box of dice, a box of pretty things.
Yeah, the shiny click clacks.
The shiny click clacks, the many, many click clacks. Yeah, that's a bit weird to think about, actually, because the attitude's changing for sure, but my experience of tabletop role-playing games, I was very much in that camp of people that just thought it was a bit weird. Like, similar to you, my first experience was with D&D at school. I don't know what edition it would have been, but it was like a game, and I just did not enjoy it. I just thought it was a complete waste of my time. And it's only through the last year and a bit that I've started to get into it via Vampire the Masquerade and branching out into the other World of Darkness games, so Wraith of the Oblivion, World of the Apocalypse, and Cyberpunk to an extent as well. And I just think it's pretty neat that you have this university that treats it like a society like sports or whatever societies that they could have, and they'd actually supply these materials. That sounds a pretty welcoming environment.
Yeah, I don't know if it was just like kind of the university that I went to, because I went to a university down in Brighton. I was at the University of Sussex, so I was in the Sussex Downs, which is literally like 10 minutes bus ride away from Brighton city centre. And yeah, just like the people and the environment was just so welcoming. And I got to meet new people through board games from all walks of life and different identities as well. And being in that environment is what really encouraged me to question why I was playing able-bodied characters every time when I myself was disabled. Like, why couldn't I play someone who was like me? And I'd have a lot of conversations with like-minded people who were like, the rules are kind of constrictive in that point, and we discussed things about how clearly the games were written by mostly able-bodied people, or people who were kind of, told that it had to fit a certain design because, there's a certain way a hero should be able to look and perform. Which there have been a lot of stereotypes, especially in fantasy, in regards to, what characters and heroes should look like and what villains should look like.
Yep.
And behave like, and yeah, and we discussed things like that, which were things when I played it at high school and in the 2 years before university that I never really questioned. So getting to meet people who really opened my mind on that front, and it was kind of at that point where I worked through a lot of internalized ableism on my own end, and really started to realize what I could actually do in terms of changing up tabletop games and, working with the rules that are already established, questioning really bad rules which, don't make sense, or being flexible and changing up the rules so that it can adapt to new accessibility item in, like the combat wheelchair. Like, I definitely put the kind of years down at university being like the formative years to me deciding that, yeah, I want to make a wheelchair for D&D, and I want to make it something that, essentially lets a disabled character do anything that an able-bodied character can do in terms of adventuring in D&D.
That's that whole, for lack of a better word, reasoning and monologue is kind of the reason why I believe you're an incredibly inspiring individual. Because
Thank you.
I don't know, it must have been about this time last year, or maybe just a bit afterwards, where the combat wheelchair was starting to come to life, so to speak. And it was like various people I followed, like liking the various different tweets that you're doing, like calling people out on ableist behaviours. And you don't hold anything back, you don't spare any punches, which is something, I don't know whether that's a British thing or that's just a you thing, but it's just something I really admire. Like just giving no fucks about these really shitty points and ignorance. So did you start working on this when you were at university, or was it just like some time afterward? Or
the combat wheelchair, and like you were saying, like last year, so August is when I published the combat wheelchair last year. I'd finished university at that point because I finished in May, I believe, of last year, or beginning of June. I can't really remember. Time.
Yeah, and a pandemic sort of makes everything feel like 10 years.
Time and a pandemic. Yeah. So I had graduated by then. But the build up to me posting the combat wheelchair last August was a year-long process of me making it and playtesting it and everything. And that was during my final year of university. I decided, finals aren't stressful enough. Let's put something else on top of it to work on. And it actually became like, it was stressful at times, but it became like a kind of really therapeutic passion project that I would do in my spare time. And, I realized, well, the university has this 24/7 library. It never closes. And I can go there at any time to get resources. I didn't have to just get stuff related to my degree there. You could go into a different department, and I started looking up sports and going to like the disability section within that section, and looking up there, finding out about documentaries and things that I could watch, and had free access to because I was a student at the university. So I decided as well that I might as well make most of the resources that were there. And in my final year, I had plenty of access to things like that, which definitely helped. And it was something that like I would take a break on to work on, and it became like a kind of like fun exercise to work on between writing essentially like my dissertation essays and things like that. So it became kind of a support as I made my way through final year. And it was a lot of fun to work on. And I definitely don't regret doing it in my final year. So yeah, like I really had a good time with it. And yeah, though it was stressful, I'll admit, like it was definitely fun, and overall the payoff was great because my friends and other disabled people now have a wheelchair that they can use in D&D with their characters.
It is incredibly wonderful and wholesome to see like you tweeting, retweeting, and just seeing other people talking about it, and just like feeling that they can belong within the game. Like you said earlier on, they don't have to tabletop games are essentially pretending to be somebody else, but they don't have to pretend so far that they don't have to, I don't know, leave their wheelchair or their support to enjoy. They can be more akin to themselves, because all of our characters have some level of self-insert to them, and it's just wonderful to see that, as we said, that people can be a bit more like themselves, a bit more truer to themselves and their beliefs, and show that just because that you do use a wheelchair or any level of support, that you can't just be as much as a badass.
Yeah, there's that kind of when I first put the wheelchair out there, where people were like, well, why would disabled people want to play a disabled character? The game's meant to be about escapism. And like you said, people put a level of themselves within a character. you can look at any character you make, and there is something there that makes them your character. Even if they're the polar opposite of you, they're still born of you wanting to make someone who's not like you. So actively, this character is like you because this character knows and acts against the things that you would normally do as a person. They're intrinsically tied with you. And people don't realize, I think a lot of able-bodied people especially don't realize that disability is so much a part of a person's identity.
Absolutely.
They seem to think it's this thing that like you can either turn on and off at will, or you have to carry it around with you like some sort of luggage that you can just leave at the door when you go and do things, and it really isn't. It's a
You
part
can
of you,
swear,
and
by
I'm
the
not
way,
saying
just to let you know.
okay. And I'm not saying that that disability should be the only character trait in your character, because it shouldn't be, because disability isn't the only part of a disabled person. But to try and make out that it should be a thing that you want to escape from when it's a person's everyday normal, quote unquote, like you can't really detach yourself from it exactly. And though a lot of disabled people have played able-bodied characters, there has been, if you talk to them, especially on the community on Twitter or in Discords, that they want to play characters like themselves. It's just that the rules have never allowed for it.
No.
Or they've had DMs who only see disability as this negative. And I found that a lot of a few of the disabled people that have been, I wouldn't want to use my wheelchair in D&D. Like, that's fair enough. I don't mind. But when people are like, come in, disabled people, I've had people who use wheelchairs and they come across and talk about how much they really resent their disability, and it's not so much that there's a wheelchair in D&D that's the problem, it's that you have internalized ableism, and that's the problem. Nobody's making you use these rules. And I feel sorry for some of the disabled people who come in, and clearly they're very angry at themselves and their own situation, because a lot of it is to do with the fact that society isn't accessible and sees disability it's this very bad thing. So of course a lot of disabled people, myself included at one point, were very angry at themselves for being disabled. Like it's something that you can somehow help, which really you can't. And yeah, it's something that it takes time to really process, especially if like you become disabled as part of an illness or a sudden accident, and it's like suddenly very abruptly in your life and part of your life. It can be very hard to accept. Like I've been through it myself. And the wheelchair in D&D, there's, for some reason people seem to think that like you're forced to use it, which really you're not at all. Disabled people aren't forced to use it. Able-bodied people aren't forced to use it. If you don't want to use it in your games, don't. That's your choice.
It's, as you said, it's just a bit of homebrew made by one person that you can only really grab from their Patreon and their Twitter page. And even if it was being shoved into the books, again, it would always be presented as an optional thing. Like, you're not going to have like the writers just rise from the floor and just stare over you until you implement it, because
yeah,
it's just dumb. And yeah, what you were saying earlier on about the internal frustration, that's something I can say that I've gone through myself, like especially during my later teen years. I was a very angry individual, and I was one of those people who, well, anyone who doesn't know, I am autistic, and I, on occasion, especially during those late teen years, was one of those people who saw my autism as some vile curse, because from my perspective, it didn't seem that anything I could say or do could do anything right. It's like proper teenage stroppy years, but when you dig beneath the surface, there's a lot of, as you say, outside influences that dictate, I guess, in air quotes, how I should feel about things with autism in particular. So often when I tell people that I'm autistic, because it's not a visible a disability that I look normal in air quotes, and there's just like a list of stereotypical questions. Oh, you seem too nice, you're too happy, and my personal favorite, you're nothing like Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory.
Oh, yeah.
And it because media has often portrayed autistic people as like these shallow stereotypes, and often when people ask me like what's it been like being autistic, it just makes me laugh, because it's like I woke up one day and I was neurotypical or normal, slipped on a banana peel, hit my head, and now I've got this thing in quotes wrong or different with me. And it's just I mean, for some people I guess that could make sense, because similar to what you were saying earlier on, some people go through a huge portion of their life not knowing or not having a diagnosis and being much later on. So they know that they're different or weird. I'll say that I'm weird. I've got no shame admitting that. And they can't quite put a label to it. So frustration can come through that way. And there's just a lot of ignorance. And I feel that in some places attitudes are shifting for the better, which is good. But I believe there's still a lot more work that should be done.
Yeah. What you said about, like, you know, stereotypes, and that applies to, I think, like every disability. And it's the reason why people don't realize that disability is a very, very broad word. And it's also, you know, a very, very broad spectrum. Like, it's not a monolith. And every disability within the word disability also is a spectrum. There is no criteria that you have to meet completely in order to be disabled. And, you know, having those stereotypes about autism, like you said, the Sheldon Cooper kind of stereotype, and then you try and explain to somebody who genuinely thinks that that every autistic person has to be like Sheldon Cooper, that actually autism is a spectrum, and, you know, it affects every individual differently, that they get completely confused. And, you know, you do realize that, like, media and, you know, social structures and interactions really lean into that kind of portrayal. Like when I was going through a lot of internalized ableism, is I wouldn't class myself as disabled, because, you know, to me disability meant wheelchair, unable to do anything, you know, that kind of stereotypical unable to do anything kind of attitude, when actually disability is very, very broad. And coming to terms with that, like myself, you know, like I now do use a wheelchair because, you know, even though I am not paralyzed or, you know, unable to use my legs, I'm going to take the assistance as I need it, because I am actually disabled. I just have a different disability. And, you know, coming to kind of terms with that was really difficult, because, you know, you'd get people, especially when I didn't show as many symptoms physically when I was younger, I'd get people saying, oh, well, you don't look, you know, visibly like there's something quote unquote wrong with you. So are you really sure you're disabled? And I'd even get that from doctors. You know, you don't look a certain way, so therefore you can't be. And then
Jesus
as the
Christ.
symptoms got worse, they were like, oh shit, yeah, you know, maybe we should have listened to you, because now we realize that you have a condition. And I'm like, oh wow, really? Almost like I've been telling you that since age 12. And, you know, the fact that it can even affect the medical system to the point where they're like, well, you don't look a certain way, so we're not going to, you know, do any medical tests or any medical investigation. Like, that is ridiculous. Why should it affect a medical system? And yet it does.
It's absurd. I mean, a lot of you were saying my brother, who has various things going on which I'm not going to disclose, like my mum takes him to the hospital and doctors and things and back, and just repeats these same stories over and over again, and doctors speaking over the top of her, like yes, you may understand some aspect of what you're studying, but you don't understand how it affects my brother. As you're saying, it's a spectrum. It's not like every single person has these same symptoms. it's not quite pick and choose, so to speak, but it's, there's like a bit of this, a bit of that, and some elements might be worse than others. It's just crazy that people just can't think of it as a spectrum, as you say. I mean, myself, autism, it's often been referred to as the autistic spectrum disorder, and is often described as being like a rainbow, and like, two shades of red is the same color, for example, and it's just so I'm just rubbing my head with frustration that just people just can't get or understand or be prepared to take that on board. It's silly.
Yeah, it really is. And these stereotypes even also come through in games as well. Like, you'll see villains who are disabled, and the whole reason they're a villain is because they're disabled and it makes them angry, and now they want everyone else to feel like how they feel, which is insulting, to say the least. The thing is like, every time I see a character like that or a villain like that, it's like, just go get therapy. Oh my god. Like, don't be like, they wouldn't be a villain. There are many disabled people out there who go and get therapy for thinking this way. Like, nobody turns into a super villain. Like,
but apparently they do.
And it's not to say that, disabled people can't be villains, because they can, but it's when the disability becomes the reason that they're a villain, there's a problem. Like, one of the really good examples I give of this is Darth Vader in Star Wars. Because he is disabled, and his suit has been deliberately designed to aggravate his disabilities so that he stays angry and will use the dark side of the Force. And when I explain it to people like that, they're like, oh, that's bad. And I'm like, yeah, it is, isn't it? It's really bad. But you see that a lot.
It's diabolical.
Yeah, and you really see that a lot. And it's just
there's just some things. Sorry.
No, I'm just saying, it's so bizarre that, and it really gives you an insight to how a lot of able-bodied people or neurotypical people think disabled people are like, that they must be miserable with their life and they must be so angry all the time. And yeah, there are times where, as a disabled person, I have been angry or I've been upset with my condition, but it's something that I process, and I get joint supports and mobility aids and essentially adapt to anything new symptom-wise that comes up. It can be frustrating, yes, absolutely. And I think, that's something interesting that you can put in your character, because it's very realistic. And, my characters themselves have been frustrated with their disability at times, but never to the point that suddenly their alignment is chaotic evil and now they want to kill everyone and everything because, they had like one bad day of a chronic pain flare. Like, that's not how it works. My characters have had bad chronic pain flare days, and the most that they've done is been really miserable and snapped at members of the party because they're in pain. But they've never, suddenly dark side of the Force murdered everyone in the party for so much as looking at them. It is just so bizarre. And, you see it in all sorts of media, even fairy tales as well. Like, as old as fairy tales and folklore is, you see that a lot as well, with villains being disabled. Or, interestingly, the heroes or the protagonist of like the fairy tale story being disabled, but it's only because they've been cursed to be that way, and if they become a good person, they'll suddenly be magically cured of it.
Yes. I've never been fond of that. There's just so many things wrong with that on so many levels. Like, a lot of horror relies on this trope as a driving factor. Like, to some stories on vampires, witches, and hags and Frankenstein. and all manner of things.
And asylums being used as well.
Absolutely lovely stuff. And a favourite example of mine, not quite a fairy tale, so to speak, is Hunchback and Notre Dame. In the sense that, with sort of on the flip side of that, and that I feel Quasimodo was wrong in the fact that he's just supposed to be happy and content with things around him, not getting the love interest. They could have easily have made that,
Yeah, like, the Disney version of that story is, he was a good person, and even though his disability wasn't quote unquote cured, he should be happy that he has friends. And it's like, yeah, but like, why? He had like such a bond with Esmeralda, like why not make him the love interest,
Yeah.
Like Disney normally does between male and female characters. Especially when they have a bond as close as like those two characters did. Oh wait, it's because he's disabled and not appealing enough in terms of looks to be, a love interest for Esmeralda, which is just so bizarre. I mean, if you read the book, it's a completely different ending, and it's a really sad, horrible ending.
Yes, so I should have been clear that I specifically meant the Disney adaptation.
Yeah, there is a book called Disfigured on Fairy Tales and Disability by Amanda Leduc, who is disabled herself, and they talk about that kind of Quasimodo, disabled people should be happy with what they get. They can't earn a love interest. They can't earn a place in a story unless able-bodied people give them that place, like Esmeralda does, and Frollo does. And it's upsetting, that it establishes those tropes, but those tropes have been there since like folklore fairy tales. And the fact that only really now we're starting to think differently about it, and change it, it's so bizarre. And especially I think changing it within TTRPG is so good, because so many TTRPGs rely on fantasy, and fantasy in turn is inspired by folklore and fairy tales, especially in terms of, say, like The Witcher, especially because fairy tales are actually true in that world, and actually happen. Like Cinderella losing her shoe is because she got eaten by a monster in The Witcher, canonically, which I think is great. I think she gets eaten by a Zoogle or something. And all that's left of her is her glass, a Zoogle. I think it's like a type of vampire, I believe. And she gets eaten by it, and all that's left behind is the glass slipper.
What a way to go.
The prince tries to find her and like can't. And it ends really sad in The Witcher, as most fairy tales do. And I think, handling disability and subverting the stereotype for disabled characters in The Witcher is a big interest of mine, especially with the project that I'm working on personally at the moment with Disability in The Witcher TTRPG, is, taking a world that typically you would think wouldn't be very accessible to disabled people. And I have been using actual history books on disability for both Western and Eastern Europe, and going through to design believable prosthetics and wheelchairs and such in a pseudo Middle Ages setting, because that's what The Witcher is, really. It has limited technology, and magic is typically used for selfish purposes. So like mages and sorceresses only really use it for themselves. So getting to, work that in and talk about it, and discuss ableism in terms of The Witcher, and getting to address these things in a setting that I really, really care about and love, is really fulfilling. And there is ways to address it. Like, people who say that it's because the setting is the way that it is just a cop-out.
Yep.
like saying, oh, but The Witcher is based on fairy tales and, doesn't have certain medical capabilities, so therefore such and such wouldn't exist, like in terms of prosthetics or something. And it's like, actually, you're wrong, and here's why. And I even lay out real life world examples.
Yeah, because the invention of the wheelchair is quite the ancient idea, really.
Yeah, ancient Greece had it. One of their gods, Hephaestus, is depicted using a wheelchair on many pieces of original artworks, and even in mosaics, because his I believe his feet in his story were twisted backwards, so he was unable to walk comfortably. So most of the time he was either using a wheelchair, and I think at one point he's also been depicted using crutches and canes to move around. So like, it's been there, it's always been there, and even historians have discovered that you normally get these depictions of Greek temples, ancient Greek temples, with all these steps going up. But the steps were kind of limited, really, and you didn't have to use them. They actually had access ramps designed to go all the way up to the temple, not just for disabled people, but for the elderly and for young children who couldn't walk up all those stairs. The stairs were completely optional. And then when people are like,
I did not know that.
And then because temples and religion have always been really important, so therefore they should have been accessible to everyone, was kind of like Greek philosophy on that. And so, having people turn around to me and be like, oh, it's completely unbelievable that a wheelchair would exist in a setting like The Witcher. And I'm like, well, it's based on medieval Europe. And they did have wheelchairs at that time, and they had quite advanced prosthetics, to the point where like they even had interchangeable parts. There were prosthetic hands that like you could take off your prosthetic arm and change them for another prosthetic hand that was shaped for writing specifically, so you could write easier. And people make out that like the Middle Ages was, this time where just technology didn't exist at all, and they were like, well, how would a character using a wheelchair get up steps? And it's like, the pulley system has kind of been there since like ancient Egypt. You know that, right? Like, they were able to use lifts and make kind of, old, essentially they would be elevators, really. And they would do that not just for people, but for carrying cargo and goods and things like that. So yeah, like, it's completely plausible. And the fact that people say that it can't exist in a fantasy setting is ridiculous, because the only limit is your imagination. And even though I've used imagination in terms of making this stuff for the Witcher tabletop game, is I've still made it, and it's still completely plausible in terms of the Witcher. Which is ridiculous. I shouldn't have to say that it's plausible. Like, disabled people should have to argue why they get to exist in anything. But the thing is like, the Witcher setting...
Imagine the uproar if it was anything else.
Yeah, like, the Witcher setting is brutal and dark, and, bad things happen a lot. So, people being disabled, whether it be through war or a monster attack or a magical accident, it's gonna be common. And even like canon characters from the series have disabilities, or illnesses and things, and have experienced all of that. Like, people think that Triss Marigold looks like how she is in The Witcher 3, which, she wears all these low neck dresses and stuff, which she actually wouldn't, because in the books she has very bad scarring from the Battle of the Sodden, where she was extremely burned. And she vowed she would never wear low neck dresses again. And then in The Witcher 3, because, woman must show boobs, is they give her this low cut dress, and it's like, she wouldn't wear that. She canonically wouldn't wear that, but okay. So even just things like that. And
you got to get that male demographic in there somehow.
Yeah. It's essentially what it is. And I address things like that in the tabletop PDF that I'm making. and talk about it a bit. And there's even things about, like, from witches' perspectives, because a lot of children would be injured before they even reached the trial of the grasses to become a witcher. So a lot of them would take injuries that would then become disabilities or develop into a lasting injury throughout their adulthood. And it doesn't necessarily mean that, like, they would get killed off easily. Like, that's not how it works. Like, it's even stated that it's when a witcher slows down physically, like becomes old, that, like, they'll get killed off. Or if they are unprepared for a battle, they'll get killed off. So it would be ridiculous to think that a disabled witcher wouldn't plan excessively before going to fight a monster, because I think they would. And so like it makes sense that I can't believe I'm having to, like, even argue that witches that disabled characters belong in the Witcher setting, but I have found that the community around the Witcher tabletop game have been so supportive compared to the D&D community with the combat wheelchair. Like, they've just been supportive of everything, and I think a lot of that as well in part comes from RTalsorianGames being very supportive as well. Like, I know I work for them, but they don't have to support my projects outside of the work that I've been contracted for, and yet they do. They show how much they care. The fact that they went into Cyberpunk RED and readdressed all of the prosthetics, and you no longer can get cyber psychosis if you've had augments solely for disability purposes or because you have transitioned. They've even put it on transitioning surgery now as well. So you don't get any penalties or negatives or anything for any of that, which is great, because that was a problem before with Cyberpunk. The fact that I did make a thread about it, and they addressed it in their game and changed it around, and then they added cyber chairs and wheelchairs, which was great. So seeing a company actively and consistently listening to people and making those changes is great, because a lot of companies, I'm not going to name names, don't do that.
I mean, you can. I mean, I won't stop you.
I mean, I won't. For work's sake. But
I know. I jest.
But yeah, like seeing RTalsorian be very supportive really does mean a lot. And they're even supportive in terms of, like, my contractual work. I won't say, obviously, what I've worked on, but I have put disability aspects in, and every time I've asked if I could do that, they've been 100% supportive and behind it. And have even checked in, asking if there's anything that they can do to make sure that certain things are represented well in the game, which is great, because, it really means a lot, because, we don't get a lot of companies doing that kind of thing. And when they do, they don't do it to the extent a lot of the time that RTalsorian goes for. So yeah, that's been, like, a really positive
It doesn't
experience.
take much, does it?
Yeah, like, it's doing the bare minimum, and a lot. It's kind of appalling that a lot of companies don't do that, which is why it kind of means a lot when one company does step up and does consistently keep trying and acknowledge when they're wrong as well.
Yeah. I mean, I addressed this point recently in a special Q&A episode I did for the podcast, and somebody asked about this sort of question, and the answer I sort of gave it, like, how could companies, like, represent the different issues better, issues in air quotes, you know what I mean. I just said, just hire people. Yes, it's going to cost more money and time to do these things, but that's the point. Like, it just shows that you care, because anybody could make a tweet or a statement on a blog post or something about that they care, this, that, and the other. But beyond that, if you don't actually show that you do care, then it's just hot air, or, I don't know, in a typing sense, clickety-clackety, digital spacey-wacy. I don't know where I was going with that. But
like you were saying, like, it also shows, if they invest the money into putting this content in, they're going to make that money back from new audiences that before weren't represented. So even from like a business standpoint, it's a good business move.
Yeah.
And yet companies don't
Absolutely.
do it or don't want to do it. Or they want to do it, but do it at the very bare minimum without hiring any new people who actually know what they're doing to do it. Not naming any names.
Well, I felt the hot air from that one. Yeah, there's just really no excuse at this point, especially with how vocal, rightly so, people are. And, you have certain things that come up in the news about what happens when people do it badly. See ya. Like, there is really, like, just, from everything that you've been saying so far, it's the fact that you may be disabled and you are a wheelchair user. You are not some font of all knowledge. You suddenly don't know anything. You've had, to do what you do, you've had to go away and research and understand the material you're working with, where wheelchairs and prosthetics would fit in the given setting, and then and all the other stuff around it. But it's just really, just at the end of the day, it just requires just a bit of research. And I'm making bit as a if I was to type it, really bold, because, as I said, there's really no excuse at this point. You could feign ignorance like 10, 20 years ago with this sort of thing, if you wanted to. But even then, I wouldn't say that it was permissible. But it's certainly not an excuse now.
Yeah, and, like you said, with it learning to do and work on the areas I've worked on, like, for example, with, the Witcher project I'm working on personally, and it's like, it's a learning curve, and it will always be a learning curve, because not every disabled person knows every single experience. And, I've invested my own time and my own money into buying books and researching and also reading blogs from disabled people with the experiences I am trying to convey or represent within the PDF. And even I acknowledge there's a part at the beginning that says, if there are things that need to change, if they aren't correct, if things need to be added, like, send an email here and I will update the PDF accordingly. I will put in the extra time and sit there and learn and do it. Because it's the like you said, the bare minimum to get it right. And
yeah,
and to always actively acknowledge that things change, words change, things that aren't considered ableist words now maybe in the future, or terminology may change, and things like that. And that there's no real there's no real like it's going to stay this way forever in terms of ableism and disability representation. So, these companies should be also aware of that, and any other individuals who are also working on projects like this should be aware of that and be adaptive. Like, don't take it as a personal affront if you get something wrong. Acknowledge it, learn from it, correct it, and continue to do right once you've learned from it, and like you said, like that's just the bare minimum of it, and it's the process that I always go to whenever I'm making these things, and like with the combat wheelchair, a lot of the process was me giving the rule set to people who use wheelchairs and them going, okay, that reflects the experience. No, that isn't possible. Or no, that doesn't quite capture the experience. And then going back to the drawing board and starting again, and figuring out what was wrong with the rules. How could they reflect things better? Like it's a process. And I think a lot of companies are either scared of putting the time in or are so scared of getting things wrong that they try and skirt around or avoid or just lightly touch on disability. But in doing so, it's a bad look. It's a really bad look for them, because it makes them look like they do not care at all, or that they only care in such a light way that it's seen as, a cash grab or trying to ride the waves of something else. Where if they actually hired people and made this an active part of their writing team or designing team, then it's more sincere. And, they're more likely to get content that is correct, that presents things positively. And, if revisions do need to be made to things, that they would only be minor rather than having to rewrite a whole thing because they put something really grossly ableist in. If you're hiring disabled people to do it, there's possibly a small chance that an ableist word might slip up and appear. And if that does, it's only a small minor revision that can be made. Whereas if it's a company of mostly able-bodied people who have hired practically nobody who's disabled to work on these things, then of course there's going to be a massive revision or a massive amount of work that needs to go into it to change it. But yeah, like trying to get companies to understand that, especially like really big companies, is just so difficult because they're very comfortable, I think, with the audience that they have now, that they see any change as shoving that audience away rather than including more people into it.
I mean, I agree totally with everything that you said. No complaints to me. Like I've done my own homebrew for Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, which they aptly named Kindred Wheelchair, because seeing what you were doing with your work, it inspired me to doing something similar with Vampire the Masquerade, and it just like similar things that you're saying, I just couldn't quite believe and understand why like the various writers have not done something like this already. And as you said, with some of the lore and the things, some of the characters, it's touched upon, it's referenced. You have like an instance here, an instance there, but it doesn't really truly represent anybody. It's just something that exists. And I'm not a wheelchair user. Sure, I have members of my family and friends who use wheelchairs and have a variety of different conditions. So I had some of those resources to pull upon. But when I was doing that, I knew that wasn't enough. So I went around asking a whole host of people. I actually, wrote a tweet about it, that I was working on this. Is there anybody who could part with some advice? And there's a whole list on the PDF that I did of people who, checked through. And as something you were saying, I said some people, there were some choice of words and languages that were dated. Some of it were insensitive. And I just took it on the chin because I'm no expert on it. A recurring theme in this is just we did our research and we showed that we cared. And I feel very proud of that product and just how happy that has made people, and the fact that I get people that tell me saying, "Oh, there's a spelling error here. There's this, like tiny little minor things." But I feel very proud that I have, represented a neglected community, because it pains me to say that the fact that people like you and I and anybody else who do these homebrews, the fact that we have to do homebrews to do this, it just shows a great laziness on other companies' part. And I hope that things will change, but as I said a while ago, I just think it's like a slow crawl. And I'm hoping that if people remain to be vocal and loud enough, that all sorts of different minority groups can be fully and truly represented in their games without just, being teased or referenced.
Yeah. I think one of the games that's really kind of succeeded with that recently, and I'm not claiming that they've represented everyone, but they've definitely represented, a good amount of communities that before didn't have much representation, and that would be Cyberpunk RED. I'm not even saying that from a biased standpoint of working with RTalsorian on that. I'm being very genuine. I got given a copy of the core rulebook, a preprint one, and going through it and seeing, the dedication that went into it to represent people of color, to represent trans people correctly, to represent the disabled community correctly, is fantastic. And, they clearly put a lot of work in, and a lot of people worked on it as well. And you know that a lot of the people as well came from those backgrounds and have that experience. And yeah, the entire PDF is amazing. And the fact that they went the extra lengths for the online PDF to have alternate text on all of the artwork, so people can, read and understand what's being presented on the page. And then as well, all the PDF is screen reader friendly. So they can essentially have it read out on an audio version as well. Like, it's the fact that they went the extra lengths clearly shows that people care at that company, because I was reached out to about the PDF screen reader version, and I said I don't have that experience, but I do know a bunch of people who know how to code it that way, and passed that information on, and RTalsorianGames followed through and hired those people, and their names appear in the book. It's great to see them care that much and to really have put the effort in, and it shows through in a really stellar game. It's incredibly good.
That's amazing. Like that is genuinely amazing. Like, I'm stunned actually because of how I haven't heard or seen that. I mean, going back to my PDF, the only thing that I've been able to do with that is I've presented different versions. Like, I don't know, the nice fancy one with all the artwork and things, and I presented like a dyslexic friendly version, and then there's just a Word document which I was told by somebody is the easiest for screen readers to grab. So that's what I did in those instances. But wow, I mean, through my observations, I know and have seen that RTalsorian really do care, and it's with the stuff that they do with you, I've been able to see that they generally do care, and it's not, as you said, like what some companies would do, like a cash grab thing. It does show. And just hearing the things that they went back. So did they go back and edit these, or was these things that they were doing as they were making it?
The PDF and all of that was screen reader friendly when it went up, and had all the alt text and everything when it went up and was uploaded. They do update the PDF from time to time, I think to fix bugs or anything like that, and also to add additional content, because the Cyberchair was added in. So they added that in, put in the alternate text and everything for the artwork on that. And yeah, they update it a lot, and even when it's just something as small as word changes and things like that, that the effort is being put in, and they clearly care a lot, and seeing a company do that and not even try and present it in an advertiser way where it's clearly I guess you would call it cookie points, oh, look at us, we've done this thing. They just present it very matter of fact of, these are the changes made, this is the stuff included now, and yeah, it's just so very open about it, and very open to constructive criticism or feedback about how they can improve, which is great. I've always admired RTalsorianGames for that. Mike Pondsmith has made a great company full of great people, and though I haven't met Mike, I've had the pleasure of meeting his son Cody, and Cody is wonderful. And you can really tell that everyone at that company cares about the content that they're putting out, and they also hold themselves accountable for the content they put out, which is great, because that's what a company should do. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure working with them personally as well. They've always been a very uplifting, very positive company to work for. Yeah, they're wonderful.
I mean, that is really amazing. And I know there'll be that small percentage of people that will listen is that, even despite the fact saying that you're not being biased, they will still probably think that. But given everything that we have given everything that we have discussed, I do not think that you would go anywhere near them if they weren't as genuine.
Oh, yeah.
I just feel that I have to address that point for anyone who's, I don't know, weird and just wants to go on the attack.
Yeah, I do, check out who I'm working for and I'm kind of responsible with, who I want to work for, how do they reflect on me as a person, and my my opinions and what I'm trying to present in terms of positive disability representation. If I genuinely didn't think RTalsorian were like honest about wanting to do good representation, I really probably wouldn't be working with them at all. Even though I got offered for working on the Witcher, and I love the Witcher, like I would have turned it down if I didn't think that they were genuine or good people. But no, they've been a delight to work for. They were the first company to give me a job. So yeah, they've been wonderful. And I sincerely do recommend that people go check out their games and buy their games and buy their products. Because they are a company who care and genuinely deserve the world. Everybody there is so lovely. They're doing a lot of good things. And it's been great to work with them and be a part of it, really.
I mean, I know I keep saying this, I'm just milking this cow dry. It's just really inspiring that they do that, and the stuff that you're doing, you're giving a voice to so many different people who they struggle every day to make themselves heard, and you're out there just helping them out, really, just making them feel accepted and wanted. And I just adore the little statement that RTalsorian make say about you in the cyber chair. I don't know the proper name for it, and the artwork they did for you, how they refer to you as a champion within the community.
That was very sweet.
Again, I agree, because I know of people who do work for, they've included various different wheelchairs and disability things, but I don't think there's anybody who is loud and as active and as proactive as you are. And I'm generally quite surprised that you actually speak to me and you haven't blocked me, given the amount of times I just fangirl you and just compliment you and just shower you in praise all the time. So thank you for that. But it's, as I said, I wrote my own little bit of homebrew because I was inspired by what you're doing, and I wanted to try and add my voice to it, because I thought I wasn't being proactive enough, and now I think I have a bit more of a stand on things, and I keep myself up to date with terminologies and things. I genuinely actually think I'm a better human being just seeing the stuff that you're doing, which sounds a bit dramatic, but
I mean, I'm really glad that putting work out there has inspired so many other people to realize that they do have a voice and they do belong in fantasy, a genre that for so long has essentially told them you can't belong here, or if you do, you're just a kind of by the sides character that doesn't do a lot. And it has been very touching to see people say or tag me in things or credit me saying they were inspired by my work. And I'm glad I was able to help people realize that they rightfully have a place and have always had a place in fantasy. It's just that the people who have been making most of the big content in fantasy just don't think to include them. And that's on them, and it's not on you as a disabled person. You have a place, and you belong, and your characters and you as a person are just as valid in creating fantasy characters and worlds as any able-bodied neurotypical person is. Keep making that content, because the thing is a lot of people seem to think that if they push you down enough that you'll shut up. And if anything, don't let it. Just get louder, if anything, and keep creating things. Literally, the people that try and stop you are the people that just want it to remain bland milquetoast fantasy, and not have any they go on about realism in fantasy, but then they don't want to include disabled people, which by extension means that they don't care about realism in fantasy. So ignore them. You know, you are worth so much more than like they'll ever understand or try to understand. And you know, if you're getting hate from people who are like, you're ruining you know, tabletop games, that means you're doing something right. Like if you're being told that you have ruined, like personally I've been told that I've ruined Dungeons and Dragons, that's a win for me. That's great. I think that is the funniest thing I have ever been told, to the point that I have a plaque that someone made for me that says is an award for my most distinguished service. I'm reading it now.
An actual
in
plaque?
Ruining the beloved games of Dungeons and Dragons. I have a plaque, and it's going to go up on my wall as soon as I get my own place. It's going to go up pride of place. You know, like, yeah, just take it as a win. If people, you know, are upset because you've made a wheelchair and it works and they genuinely can't find anything wrong with it mechanically or lore-wise, it's a win. Like, it's hilarious. Just let them be mad. You know, let them be angry. Because their opinion really doesn't matter at the end of the day. It really doesn't.
No, it doesn't. And I just find it most baffling that people get so wound up with it. Like, you know, it kind of makes sense of everything that we've talked about, but at its very core value, it does not make sense that they just come up with all this bullshit. Like, it's referring specifically to Dungeons and Dragons. Like, the very principle of the game, you make up characters of elves, dwarves, whatever races you have. I'm not very familiar with it. You go to fantasy towns and villages, you fight monsters and slay dragons, loot, rewards, rinse and repeat. All of that is acceptable and it makes sense. But a wheelchair can't.
Yep. It's hilarious. It's like you can have Spelljammer, which is like spaceships in space, which is a canon setting in D&D, and Jarlaxle Baneray can have a submarine with electronics that work in it, but God forbid you have a chair with wheels, guys. God forbid. Like, it's the funniest thing where people are like, oh, it's not realistic. And I'm like, yes, Jarlaxle Baneray has a shark-shaped submarine, but me having wheels on a chair is somehow implausible. Like, it's so funny. Which is why, you know, people who make those arguments, it's sad in terms of, like, you can see how kind of restrained their imagination is, to the fact that the kind of social norms that they've learned come through in their own artworks. You know, like, they go, oh, well, buildings in D&D wouldn't be accessible. Yeah, because your brain says that they can't be accessible. It's a fantasy role-playing game that relies on your imagination. If you're imagining buildings that are inaccessible, you're the problem. There's no change if you imagine an accessible building. It does not suddenly derail the whole story or destroy the setting of D&D. It really doesn't. And it makes a lot of sense a lot of the time. You know, having accessible dungeons, a lot of them would have ramps because you're moving around heavy gear and things. Or going to a gear shop for adventurers. Yeah, it's gonna be accessible because likely, you know, they have an area where they have to take shipments in, which would be like a big garage that they have to, like, put everything in. So, you know, that would have to be accessible for, you know, dropping off things and deliveries and backing vehicles into it. Like, it's entirely plausible. People just don't want to think it can be accessible because that means that they have to include disabled people, which is on them. And, you know, it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous argument, and it will always be a ridiculous argument that disabled people can't exist in fantasy, because literally the only limit is people's imaginations.
Yeah. And the variant of those arguments that really baffle me and concern me are the ones who say, actually, what you're doing is harmful. You're trying to make, like, gimmicks and game ideas, like traditional, like, merits and flaws sorts of things. Well, if you actually read the supplements, you would see that that's not what we're doing. Sure, you have the core books may list them as flaws. I know that old editions of Vampire the Masquerade, it will refer to some physical things as flaws, which is very insensitive. But especially what I was trying to do was just correct some of those. And like, I can remember one of the things I did with my homebrew is that I uploaded an audio version on my YouTube channel and other places you can listen to podcasts. And there was this person who claimed to be some psychologist who just presented his thesis on what I was doing was just offensive, and the whole thing was just filled with lies.
Yeah, it usually is. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, people like that will always exist, and people who try and say it's harmful are just people who don't want disabled people to be included in things, or they are going through a lot of internalized ableism and anger themselves, in which case it's really on them. And, you know, I wish all the best to people who are that angry about their disability, and, you know, genuinely do hope that they can get help for that. But at the same time, like, people like that will always try and shut down, you know, any kind of positive disability representation. Like, people who try and argue that the wheelchair's a gimmick, it only really becomes a gimmick if you choose to upgrade it. But, like, you don't get those upgrades. You have to, like, pay for them yourself, and you know, there's a whole system that means you don't get them straight away on the chair and things like that. For all intents and purposes, it's a normal wheelchair unless you want to play in a game where you can just have, like, something nifty and useful to use on it, the same way that, like, you have something nifty and useful to use on your armor or in a magic item or on a weapon. There's no difference. And people were like, oh, well, the chair's overpowered. It's not overpowered. The base chair is not overpowered. It just allows a disabled person to do what an able-bodied hero can do. And you suddenly think that that is overpowered? Like, that really says a lot about you as a person if you think that being quote-unquote on equal ground with an able-bodied person is somehow overpowered. That's on you and how you think that disabled people have to be weaker. That is really gross. You're not coming across with, like, this great, you know, oh yeah, I really clapped back with that one. No, you didn't. You just outed yourself as an ableist online. Like, like, you know, you really came out here and just showed your ass to everyone. You know, like, you just came out here and you decided to show your ass to the entire internet is what you did. Like, yeah, it's just ridiculous. Ignore people like that. I mean, it was really difficult for me to do that at the beginning. And, like, you know, I just make funny comments now about it, or quote tweet the really, really funny ones and just, like, land a smack back. And usually they never reply and immediately block me, which is hilarious. It's just like, yeah, like, people will make silly arguments against inclusivity for the sake of having a silly argument. That's literally it. And, like, a lot of the time it comes down to eventually you kind of are able to navigate the insincere people, clearly the people who just want a reaction, or, you know, are being loudmouthed because they want somebody in their echo chamber to shout the same thing back to them. And then you work out which ones are actually being sincere. Like, I'll get people who are like, oh, I don't understand how a certain rule would work, or I can't imagine this kind of situation. Could you explain it to me? By which I'll quote tweet and explain it, just in case anyone out there has, like, the same question, but, you know, is too shy or doesn't feel that they can ask. And I'll answer it and, you know, be like, okay, this is how it works, and I'll use examples and provide links and things and resources. Like, if you're coming across sincere, I will give you a sincere answer. But if you come into the comments, you know, playing stupid games, you win stupid prizes. And by stupid prizes, I usually clap back publicly and you look silly, because your argument wasn't really an argument, you know? And, like, you eventually kind of have to just realize that some people want to stay in their echo chamber and want to continue playing D&D like it's still in 1st edition, where women were weaker than men and all that ridiculous bullcrap. You know, like, if people want to continue playing D&D like that, let them, because they're a very small minority and they just happen to be very, very loud because likely nobody else listens to them and their awful opinions. So like, just don't feed into it, and leave them to it. Like, there are times when you're just gonna have to realize, I found that, like, you won't change certain people's opinions, so why invest time into it? You know, and it links back to that, finding the sincere people over the insincere ones. And after a while, you do get good at noticing who is being very sincere. And yeah, like, it's just yeah, it's the internet at the end of the day. And you know, that anonymity, that slight anonymity that some people have, means that they can really go off and show, you know, how ableist they are, or try to get a reaction out of someone because they're very bored and sat at home during a pandemic with nothing else to do other than try and get a rise out of disabled people online or another group of people online. Yeah, just really, like, pay them no mind. Like, you know, he just is what it is. Take your victory. You made something great. And at the end of the day, people like what you have made. The majority of people, you know, like what you have made. And what really matters, like what mattered for me in the combat wheelchair, is the people I made it for, wheelchair users, you know, liked it and enjoyed it and can now see themselves in D&D. And I could not care less for what anybody else says, because that is who I made it for. And those people, you know, enjoyed it, which means the entire world to me, more than like any praise that I've had from like other people who aren't disabled. The fact that disabled people like the thing that I made, enjoy the thing that I made, use it in their own games, and can play characters that are like them, and you know, they can experience the world of D&D as a disabled person. I think that's great, and you know, that's exactly what I wanted from it, and I couldn't be happier in terms of that, really.
I mean, you should be fucking proud, like over the moon about it, because what you've done and what you've started is something that's really incredible. I mean, I've read it. I don't play D&D. I want to. I have the 5th edition books sitting around somewhere. Want to get into it, and I've read it, and I think it's very good. It's, as I keep saying, as I probably will keep saying, it's what you're doing is just fantastic, and I just really admire what you're doing and the fact that you just don't put up with any bullshit. Like, it's one of my favourite things to do online is just like outing idiots and people that are just going out of their way to be arseholes, because I've never been a fan of bullying. Then again, no one's really a fan of bullying. Like, I don't like...
Yeah, there's a difference between, you know, bullying someone and pointing out, you know, their ableist behavior. You know, and I think it's important not to like get personal, obviously, with the responses, which I don't do. I always just go, you know, and actually break down what they say, why it's wrong, and then be like, you know, you're just being ableist. Just say you don't want disabled people to play D&D as themselves, and move on and get over it, you know. And yeah, like, it's important to address ableist comments from people, because I think if you don't reply to it, obviously don't reply to it all the time because you just feed into it, but if you don't reply to the ones that try and present it as scientific fact that disabled people, you know, can't belong, or scientific fact that you're doing damaging work, it's important to reply to those, because people will think, one, it's like a legit argument, and two, it's spreading misinformation, and three, it kind of just like feeds into the normalization of this behavior in the community, that people think that being ableist is okay, which is an incredibly large problem, especially in the D&D community. It is a massive problem, and I have experienced it full force to the point of death threats. And I have even had people who've worked professionally on D&D turn around and go, well, the community is like nice about it. And I've been sat here with like 56 death threat emails like, are you sure about that? Because the community is not as great as you seem to think it is. You know, and so it's important, I think, to address
people in the community that behave that way and genuinely think that way, because they're the people who are normalizing the behavior. And, in part, they play a large piece in like keeping that behavior going. And yeah, it's just something that really does need to be addressed. Obviously, like I said, don't address it so often that essentially, you'll feed into it so much that trolls come in, because they always do. Is just find the people who are being sincere about their awful opinion, and correct them on it, because they're the ones that are doing essentially the most damage, in terms of normalizing that behavior, not just within the community itself, but also at tables. Like, can you imagine the kind of table they must be running, and what they must be, normalizing to their players or their DM with that kind of behavior? So yeah, it's important to correct people like that.
I agree. And when I personally say I enjoy outing the idiots, I mean more in the sense that people who, I don't pursue everything, as you said, because it just invites trolls, it just invites bad things towards you. But when somebody says something that is harmful or just dumb for the sake of being dumb, I will address that. As I said, I don't do everyone because I don't have the time or the will, or can't quite be bothered to do it, to be honest. And yeah, it's like, it's real shitty that you've had death threats over this. I mean, unfortunately, I have had death threats over really stupid things for some of the things that I do or haven't done, but that's just bonkers. Like, just the concept that people, that's accepted normal behaviour for some people. So, yeah, sorry about that.
I mean, it was. There have been times where it was really difficult to deal with that kind of reaction to it, but like it's now just a thing where like sometimes I'll see my spam folder and it'll be like 2 poorly worded death threat emails with terrible, like just garbage written in them, and it's all like the same stuff. So like it just goes straight into like the delete forever pile. So like I never actually read them. Like you can tell from like immediately like the first word if it's a death threat or like just a troll email. Like it just it doesn't affect me as much as it used to anymore. And I now hold it as something where people are like, the D&D community is this perfect, wonderful thing, and I'm like, actually it's not, and this is why, and we actually really need to address it because it's a problem. Like that, like as bad as death threats have been, they have at least served to make the community aware that there are people like that hiding within it, and that we need to address that and stop normalizing ableist behavior at tables, or any kind of awful bad behavior at tables. It's important. Like, as bad as the death threats have been, at least I now have them there as examples of an experience with the community that can make people at least understand that it isn't as perfect as they think it is, and that there are things that need to be addressed. And it's a shame, that it came to death threats to get people to realize that. But at least it's, it's made people understand how bad certain aspects of the community is. I just think that at least I've got that as a takeaway from it.
Yeah, and it's kind of going back to what you said a while ago, is the fact that you, to an extent, the fact that you haven't annoyed, to put it lightly, there's so many people. It shows that you're doing something right, which is, it's a strange thing to happen as someone who makes content or whatever. Like, the more negative attention you get, like, you're doing something right. It's a strange way of thinking that, but I mean, as you said, it's just ignore it. Just ignore it. It's just some prick on the internet that just wants to rise at you, and just focus on the good things and the people that support you and what you do.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, that's the kind of best advice I can give, really, is that your work is important. It matters. It needs to be out there. and if you annoy people, and they get upset that you're making disability content, then you're doing something right, because we need to have this conversation about positive disability representation and educating people in the community about disability.
Yeah. I mean, as much as I don't like conflict of any level, it's very much a needed thing in our society, because without it, things don't change, or there isn't a reason why things should change. So, as unpleasant as it can be sometimes, it's important to have those difficult discussions and to lock horns with people occasionally. It's a matter of just knowing who to pick your battles with. Yeah. Progress is being made at an incredibly small pace, and you're doing, as I said, I've lost count how many times I've said it, great things. So great, in fact, that, and this is an honest thing, my mum signed up to Twitter just to follow you.
Oh, that's very sweet. Oh, that's actually really
sweet. It is.
Sweet.
Like, she won't follow me on Twitter, but she follows you. Yeah, definitely not salty about that. It's fortunate she doesn't actually listen to these podcasts, so I can get away with saying that. So, just going to wind back a little bit, talking more about the more positive elements of making sure that, that language and how we behave and interact in games is appropriate. How do you, when you're playing your games, go about having these conversations with your players, whether you are a player yourself or you are a DM?
A lot of it is to do with I just include disabled. If I'm a DM, I just include disabled characters. Make no big fuss out of it, anything like that. And I always make sure with my players, are there topics that we should touch on in terms of disability? For example, ableism never comes up at my table, ever. Just because it's something I don't want to DM, and as a player, I don't want to interact with. I think it's important to have discussions at the table as a DM about what your players themselves, not just their characters, require. I make, when I played at physical tables, I would make physical print copies of help sheets or any of the handouts that they were going to get during that session, and I'd have them in the fancy script font that normally they're in the books, and then I'd have a plain text version and an open dyslexic version, and would just put them in the middle of the table. And when the handout came along, I would just be take a handout, and nobody has to out themselves or ask for any kind of specific handout text size or anything, because it was just there for them. And I think normalizing things like that's very important. And I also have a house rule at the table that people can just get up and leave whenever they want. And they don't ever have to give the reason. They can, all I ask is that, they just text me or someone else just to let us know that they're okay. They don't have to go into detail about it, but they can discuss it if they want to. And yeah, we would have things like that. It would be open rule on you can take medicine at the table. If you've got brain fog that day and need things repeating, you can ask for a repetition of a description or character names, etc., as many times as you want. There's no you can't ask more than once, which I've had as an experience with some DMs, which was unpleasant. And they would get angry about it, because I do understand that repeating things can be irritating, but a lot of the time it isn't the player's fault. They're not actively not listening. It could be anything. It could be brain fog, medication haze. They could be having a hard time focusing because of ADHD, ADD, or autism, things like that. So repeating is a necessary part of being a DM. And another thing that I tell like DMs is like a good thing to do is when you describe things, instead of like just the 5 senses, you do a 6th, which is like a general vibe that they get from the place. So a blind character may not be able to see that they're in like a monster's lair, but you can describe certain aspects like feeling the air is cold or the walls are slick, and they get this horrible feeling that they're being watched, like that kind of thing. So they know immediately that this is kind of a more hostile, uncomfortable environment, even if they physically cannot see what it is. And, I think things like that are important, and they bring up good discussions in the game, and discussions at the table with your players and your DMs. Just normalizing things like that, like the bare kind of minimum.
In less words, some people would refer to this as a session 0, just talking to players, just making sure that everyone's hunky-dory and all the things that you've just listed, making sure everyone's happy. Or some people would use the dreaded consent forms or sheets that us snowflakes are using to ruin tabletop games. I mean, there are different ways of doing things, but it is important to have those conversations. And
the people who like complain about like having, the safety, whether it be that kind of forms, because I've been at games where like you fill in a Google form instead, so like it's anonymous and nobody else has to see the answers kind of thing, which I think is great. And the people who like argue against them, like you said, and call them like, oh, like it's just snowflakes wanting to ruin D&D games, it's like, it's cool that you as a person are like down for anything, but a lot of people aren't. And it's important that those things don't come up in a game the same way that they wouldn't interact with a video game or a TV show or film that they know have that content in. Like, I kind of put it down to, I try to explain it to people that, you may be down for anything, but there are a lot of people out there who avoid a horror genre because they just don't like being scared. So therefore, they wouldn't want horror coming up in their tabletop game, which is absolutely valid. I try to explain it like that because there are a lot of people out there who generally just don't like horror, which is, fine. And having a way that you can convey what a DM can bring into the story is great. And, if it's a problem for your DM all of a sudden and they see it as restricting the story in some kind of way, remind them that D&D isn't just the DM telling the story, it's a collaborative storytelling.
Yes.
Well, that's what a good D&D game should
Absolutely.
be, collaborative storytelling.
I've always interpreted as a bit of improvised drama, because it's essentially what it is. We're all amateur actors, well, ignoring Critical Role for a moment and similar, but the vast majority of us are amateur actors in this sense, and it's just it's just as you're saying, some people will write with a lot of things. I know I'm fairly comfortable with most things, but there's certain things that I won't like to be covered, or with a bit of warning, or parents might not want anything bad happening to children because that kind of makes sense. I don't think I should have to explain why, but I mean, I did a whole episode of my podcast about this because I thought it was such an important thing to cover, and of course it is my most disliked thing on YouTube because of course it is. But it's I mean, as you said, it's all right if you are with your group of friends and you know each other's boundaries, or you know that they're not going to be affected. They can just do anything and they're comfortable exploring anything, but just some people aren't.
Yeah, like a good D&D game campaign session should always be that the DM, essentially, it's their job to give you a setting, and to provide things for the characters, the players, to interact with. And then the DM essentially just describes the consequences of those actions. Like, that's how I've always viewed D&D. And the players themselves are the people who control the characters and then explain why those characters are doing things. and then the DM, weaves that into the story. So, like, for example, a character steals something because, maybe their backstory is that they're a thief, and then the DM says, okay, there's like consequences for that now. You've now set off a story where like this item was very important to a noblewoman, and now she really wants it back, and now you've got to try and figure out how to give it back to her without her ever realizing that it was you who stole it, that kind of thing. It should be working with the players to create a story rather than it gets brought up a lot that like it shouldn't be the DM against the players, but it's surprising like how many times like I've played a D&D game and the players seem to think that the DM's like out to get them, or the DM thinks that the players are there just to like mess up the story, but actually it should be like a give and take between both players and DM.
Yeah, I mean, if you're so attached to a story as a DM, write a book.
Yeah, or if you have like a pretty solid story, which is fair, because obviously like every adventure that gets written for a published material has a solid story, is you should also just like remind yourself that you've got to be flexible. Don't set too many things down in solid stone. Like, don't spend too much time describing every single room in a house, because like the chances are the players won't be in most of those rooms. But the way I've done it is setting up story beats. So like these are the beats of the story that can't change, but they can appear wherever. So like, maybe the players didn't go into a room and find a specific chest with the magic item in. That's fine. Just change it to the room that they're currently in and just describe that there's like a box or something hidden in the corner. And ta-da, they found the magic item that they needed for the story to progress. Like, it just needs to be flexible. Like, you can have story beats in mind because, I run a 2-year-long campaign at the moment, and I have story beats for every character laid out that I've discussed with the players, saying like, are you okay with this happening and such happening? And we've navigated these story beats, but in between that, they just do what they want and flesh out their characters and help flesh out the world with me.
Which sounds like a lot of fun to me personally. I mean, I wouldn't want to be dictated what they want to do, because if I wanted to be dictated on how to do something, I'd play a video game. Or
yeah, like you
watch
want to make
film.
you want to make the story there, like enough that the players want to be engaged with it without them feeling like they're railroaded, basically. It should feel like you got there together.
Yeah. Which is how it should be, in my personal opinion. Now, is that generally Dungeons and Dragons scenes, or is this feeling that it's the GM against the players, or vice versa? Or do you think that extends onto other tabletop games? Because playing a lot of World of Darkness, well, mostly Vampire the Masquerade, that's not really an attitude, and that's because the way the game, I guess, operates is different. I mean, all games operate differently, but D&D is primarily a combat-focused thing, whereas Vampire is more socio-political.
But yeah, I think it happens a lot in more combat-oriented games, or games where like the physical stakes are very high. There's even a section, for example, in the Witcher role-playing book that specifically says in the GM section, like, you're not against the players and the players shouldn't be against you. That's not how it works. Because if it's like that, like, you won't make it more than like one in-game day in The Witcher, because your GM will just TPK everyone with a monster and that will be the end of it. So I think, yeah, it kind of seems to be an attitude. I think it comes mostly from people who played or who play war games a lot, which originally, D&D kind of started out as like a combat-heavy game, and I think that the attitude comes from there, that the players must be against the GM and the GM must be against the players, which to me it doesn't sound like fun, just because I like a mix of roleplay and combat. But I do get why some people enjoy it, and it's probably just because they really enjoy war games. And at the end of the day, a TTRPG is what you make of it. But you don't have to go to every table and bring the the whole mindset of, okay, the GM's going to try and kill all of us. Like it should be something that's discussed beforehand, and it should be made clear what everyone expects from the game and what they want from the game, to make a game that kind of includes everyone and what they want. So I think it's important to ask your players basically, and your GM what your GM also expects as well.
I mean, yeah, it goes back to what we were saying a moment ago, just having that conversation or conversations about, asking me what they want, what they're expecting, what they don't want, etc., etc., blah, blah, blah. It's just making sure everybody's happy. I mean, isn't that just the whole... It should be the whole point of games, but apparently it's not.
Yeah, I understand it. Like, it tends to come from a lot of older players, I've noticed, that mindset. And I think, like I said, it comes from that time when, war games were pretty much peak, and that even D&D itself at that point was a war game, or based very heavily on war game rules. So, I just think it comes from that a lot. And, I think it's important now, especially, to make people realize that, especially because D&D's kind of gone in that direction now, where it's also very role-playing heavy. So yeah, always making sure what your players actually want out of the game is really important.
Yeah. I have nothing else to add there, because, yeah, just happiness. I believe we shall move on to what I believe is, from the listeners of this podcast will be excited to hear now, because I informed you about this previously, but we are going to move over to 10 questions that members of my Discord server had would like you to answer.
Okay.
And before I do that, I have to ask you, how is your knowledge on World of Darkness lore, especially that of Vampire the Masquerade?
It's very minimal. I think I played partway through one of the video games, and I've read bits and pieces, and I have ordered some of the tabletop books, but it's one of those ones where it's sat on my shelf and I haven't got round to it yet.
That is fair enough, because of course, being a World of Darkness centered content creator, but practically Vampire the Masquerade, they have all asked you very good questions I would enjoy asking, but I'm not entirely too sure. So apologies in advance. I might have to skip over some of these questions and adapt ones that can be made a bit more vague. But I hope those who asked your questions appreciate that. I tried so hard to advertise you someone who is a writer, who does all these different things. No, World of Darkness questions only. I love you guys and gals and people in between. Yeah. Okay. The first question comes from Fern, and that's Fern as in the plant. How were you introduced to Vampire and World of Darkness as a whole?
I think it was my partner at the time, a couple of years ago, had some of the vampire video games, and they looked fun, and then I realized, it's based on a tabletop as I got further into tabletop games. And yeah, I've since ordered some of the core books, and it's kind of been on my shelf and waiting to be read, which I hope to do by the end of the year, I hope, because I would like to either play in one or at least run a one-shot.
Well, I'll be more than happy to play or show you or whatever if you ever need the help or anything, because I mean, I'm always happy and welcome to talk about vampires, and especially Masquerade. Because
see, that's me, but with The Witcher. Anytime somebody's like, "Oh, I'd like to play The Witcher TTRPG," I was like, "I'd be happy to run a game."
Yeah, your passion for your tweets, it's very clear, and I don't understand half of what you're saying, but I love reading the stuff that you're doing. You did one recently on the different vampires in it, and the only thing I knew about vampires and The Witcher prior to that is that they're their own species rather than people who are turned.
Yes. You can't higher vampires are the ones where the myth came from. They assumed because those vampires are humanoid, that like they must be turned from like biting people, but it's actually not. It's just that they can take a humanoid form, and you can't turn into a vampire after being bitten by one in The Witcher.
Oh, that's a shame. My hopes and dreams are ruined in the Witcher universe.
It's a big myth that the higher vampires think is very funny.
I'd imagine they would. I'm going to skip a couple of these questions and move on to William 30 Darby, who asks, outside of the world of darkness and vampires, what sort of things are you interested in? For example, do you have any hobbies or things that you do to unwind?
Yeah, I enjoy drawing. I don't do it as much anymore, but I do enjoy art. And I've been trying to get back into that recently, both digital and oh my gosh, what's it called? I forgot what the word for actual art. You know what I mean? Like not digital art, traditional. There we go.
Yeah.
Art. I've been doing that. I am also reading and still making my way through the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. I'm on Oathbringer, which is book 3, part 1. And I'm enjoying that at the moment. Like, it's been a lot of fun. What else? Chilling with my dogs. Playing video games as well.
What's your dog's name?
Oh, my dogs. I have 2. They're both miniature dachshunds. I have a black and tan one, and his name is Colin. He's the boy. And then we have a red one, and her name is Darcy. She's the girl. They're very cute. Colin is like, they're both like the polar opposites of each other. Colin is very laid back, likes to have a lie down, be fussed, go to sleep. He enjoys his cuddles. And Darcy is a feral embodiment of chaos, and I love her. She does not sit still. Practically every picture I have of her is she's either asleep, because it's the only time she stays still, or she is a blur because she's moving. I love her. She's great.
I love them both. I've never met them, but I absolutely adore them. I have a strange soft spot for dachshunds.
They are very sweet.
So that's so cute. So the rest of your hobbies, I interrupted you with my admiration.
Yeah, like just video games. I've been playing Pokemon again lately. I'm playing Pokemon Sword at the minute because I did get it when it came out, but just never played it. So I've started playing that. I'm enjoying it. It's fun. I'm more like my first Pokemon game, because I got into Pokemon really late, is I got Pokemon Y, and I really enjoyed that. And
I really enjoy that too.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
It deserves
Pokemon
better.
Y.
It needed a sequel.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to the new Pokemon games that got announced. And yeah, I don't know why. Like, I really, really like farming games. Like Stardew Valley and Harvest Moon. Like, if I'm in a mood, like, I'll play them. They're just so chill and relaxing, and I really enjoy it. I normally name like my characters after my D&D characters, and then just like run a farm as like my D&D character, and it's nice and relaxing, and they don't have to think about like a frost giant or something eating them. So yeah, like that's been fun. I also play a lot of The Witcher. I have a lot of hours racked up in The Witcher 3. I have the PS4 version, I have the PC version, and I have the Switch version. I have all 3. And I've completed the game like all the way through, including all the DLCs, and did all like the side quests and everything, so all the map is actually fully marked. And what else have I done? I unlocked all but one of the trophies on PS4. I've got like 30% of the trophies currently on PC because I play that one the least, but I've got and I don't think there's achievements on the Switch one, unfortunately, but I've racked up like a good hundreds and hundreds of hours playing The Witcher.
Yeah, well, totally surprised by that. Did not see that coming at all.
Completely unsurprising, I think.
Yeah, totally out of character, not on brand at all. I might have to bring you back on here another time to talk about Pokemon, because outside of this, it's like one of my biggest passions. I've been playing it since the beginning. I didn't have the most responsible father in the world who just let me play video games like a really young age.
Mm-hmm.
So, but one of the things I was attached to was Pokemon. I've owned most of them. Was into the trading cards back in the day. That's from the original ones in my attic somewhere. Yeah. Anyway, I best stop myself there. Okay, the next question comes from Notre, and it is: have you read The Kindred Wheelchair, and what is your opinion on it? I promise you that I did not write this.
Grasp on the system. I thought I blended really well with the system. So I thought I just thought it was really cool. I like the artwork for it as well. I really enjoyed seeing the artwork. I just really, really enjoyed seeing, a creation that the combat wheelchair inspired. I just always think that it's really cool to see what other people make. And seeing what you made was just a really cool, almost surreal moment when you realize that your work has had an influence on somebody else. That's always very surreal. But I did enjoy reading it. I think I actually printed it off and I've got it somewhere in a folder. Because every time I get work that has been inspired by my work, I print it off and keep it in a folder. And I've got a folder full, including it's also got artwork and things that people have sent me in the post. So it's got people's letters and things in as well. It's a folder basically that when I feel either doubtful or overwhelmed in my work or unsure of where I'm going and what I'm doing, is I'll go and read over it and it'll just cheer me up. And re-motivate me.
That's really sweet. I should probably do something like that, because one time too many, I feel, what's the fucking point in doing anything? And second of all, I'm actually genuinely surprised that you've read my supplement. And
yeah, I do. I read quite a lot of people's stuff. It's like I said, it's just always really, really cool to see it. And I think it was the Kindred wheelchair that when you posted it, after I read it, I think I followed you then on Twitter. I think it was after I read it.
All right.
Yeah, because it was just really cool. I was really impressed.
Thank you so much. I remember when I got that notification, I was walking down the stairs and I was just so shocked that I missed a step and I nearly fell down. I'm not to be dramatic or anything, it's what? So, wow, that really means a lot. That not only that you read it, but the fact that you really liked it as well. And I did a good job, and Senpai noticed me. Thank you.
No problem.
All right, before I start producing man sweat from the eyes, the next question comes from Cobalt I always get this name wrong. Cobalt Seraphan Crusader. A silly question, but have you made any characters using the combat wheelchair? Any interesting stories come out of it?
Yes. There's my OG character for the combat wheelchair that I made, which was Talon. Which on his birthday, which was the 8th of April, I released a short story about Talon for free that you can get through my Patreon. And essentially it was him, the beginning of his backstory. So him recently having to use a wheelchair, his kind of self-doubts about himself and his capabilities, and him then, by chance, knowing somebody who works for Jarlaxle Bainrate, and Jarlaxle Bainrate offering him a job. And Talon has since become canon in the Forgotten Realms. So technically his story is canon.
Oh wow,
and
that's cool.
He is a character that you can unlock and play as in Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms. He's in the second slot. He's in slot 2 as a support character, and he has a special move that assists either all the good heroes or assists Jarlax or Bainray and other people aligned with him. Because like they're close friends. I say close friends, they were boyfriends. But yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, and for the Combat Wheelchair like 1 year anniversary in August, there's going to be a piece of artwork done by Kroov, who did the artwork for the Combat Wheelchair version 2.1. That you see on my pinned tweet on Twitter, the really nice artwork of Talon. They are doing the artwork again this time, and it's like a nice big piece, and it's to do with the story that I'm currently writing between Jarlax or Talon and the crew of the Eyecatcher.
That sounds really fantastic. So a lot of these names and things are going over my head because I'm not as involved with D&D, but that that really sounds... I mean, I've seen bits of your character, and I personally was aware of like the game that you mentioned. But yeah, that's awesome. I envy that. I wish my characters were canon. Maybe one day. Okay, Nurgle's grandson now asks, what is the silliest character that you've made?
Less silly, but I guess like in terms of like being like so far from who I am, like as a person myself. I made Selbuckthorn, who is a what's it called? A fawn from the Feywild, and is a Valabard. And he was so loud and so noisy and just like a really happy, bright character all the time, which isn't to say like that behavior is silly. I'm just saying it in terms of like they were so far from every other character I've ever made that like it seems almost silly to put him next to my other characters just because he's so out there. But he is one of my favorite characters. I have a few favorite D&D characters, and he's definitely one of them. And yeah, he was silly in terms of like he would come up with some really outlandish ways to get past enemies. One of my favorites was we were given a folding boat, and he was in charge of rowing the boat, and we came across a toll bridge that was built across the river like a dam, and we were told to pay a tax, and my character was like, and everyone else was like beginning to like count up their coins, and I was like, yeah, no. So I just rowed everyone to the shore, folded up the boat, walked around the toll bridge, and just carried on. And the DM looked absolutely
Brilliant.
shocked that I'd even thought of that. But it was a very Selbuckthorn thing to do. I loved him. His like gimmick was he was from the Feywild, like very recently from the Feywild, and he didn't know anything about like the Forgotten Realms customs. So like he was trying to learn about law and like how the land governs itself. And he managed to learn that, but he never really understood the meaning of honor. So like he was challenged to a duel with a noble one time. And like they stood back to back, and like, you know, you're supposed to count the paces and keep honor and turn around and then shoot. And like as soon as like the person counting said one, like Sel just turned around and began beating the crap out of this noble because he wanted to win the fight. And like all the other players had to like physically drag him off the noble. Which was just really funny. And he didn't see that he'd done anything wrong, and everyone else was like telling him to apologize, and he was like, but I don't understand what I did wrong. That's how we would have done it where I'm from. And they're like, you need to learn manners. But he eventually like learned customs, but like every now and then like he'd do something, and then like everyone else would just look at him like, that is not how like we do it here. And he'd be like, oh, okay. But yeah, he was a really fun character to play. I really loved him. And he got a good ending. He actually became a lord because he drew from the, is it the Deck of Many Fortunes, I think it's called. He drew from that, and you can either get like something bad, like instantaneous death, or you can get something good. And he became a lord and got a castle and lots of money, and he didn't really know what to do with it, so he just kind of like made it this place that's like a patron for the arts and education, that normally you'd only be able to get like universities in the city, but for it because he got like so much money that he was set for life. So yeah, he was a really fun character to play, and I'm glad he got a happy ending.
Yeah, that is always good. It very rarely happens. I mean, the last few characters I've played in games, like, they've all died.
Sometimes it happens.
They do. As you were describing the fact that he came along, I was thinking, oh, did he learn honor? No, he just got lucky.
Yeah, he got lucky. He learned some honor, but like not completely.
Just out of curiosity, you say he was very different from your other characters. Dare I ask what they are usually? Because I immediately think they're very miserable and broody.
Yes, I have a type. It is scruffy, sad boys who are himbos and are actually good people but try and hide it. So basically they're all Geralt of Rivia, but they just look different. Which is it. Like, oh, I will turn up to the table, and like my friends made it a joke where they're like, oh, have you just brought Geralt of Rivia clone number 5? And it's like, yeah, I did.
How did you know?
But my favorite character that I played was of that type was Deswyn Rennet, who was like a villager that tried to lead a coup against a vampire baroness, and failed, and she left him alive after like killing everyone else as punishment, just to make him like just so it really sunk in like how much he'd like messed up in terms of trying to do a revolution. And then he got stuck in Barovia, and like had to, we did the whole like Curse of Strahd campaign, which was really fun. He unfortunately died in the end, but it was like a fitting death. So like I was pleased that like he at least died in like a good way. Yeah, he actually got accidentally killed by Strahd. Strahd tried to turn him into a true vampire, but it failed. So like he turned into vampire spawn and 24 hours later died. So yeah, like, which was like sad, but like considering everything that had happened up to that point, and like there was like a whole complex like story going on, it did really fit for him in the end. So I was happy at least it was that.
I'm glad it was a satisfactory death, which is such a weird thing to say.
It was a good death.
And I know who Strahd is, which is the only character, or one of the few characters you've mentioned I actually know who is, so hooray.
Yeah, the vampire guy.
Yes, the big handsome vampire. All right, the final question comes from Manti, the 27th Core. I don't know what happened to the other 26th. Are there any tabletop role-playing game moments that gave you an answer or insight to a real-life situation that you'd like to share? Yeah, it's only to quite the profound turn there.
That's a good question. Less a role-playing moment, and more the first time that I brought up that I wanted to play a disabled character, and the DM kind of was taken aback. Not because they were against disabled people. They were a good friend and like didn't mean it that way. And they just kind of looked shocked, and then just really kind of sadly said like, yeah, you can't, there aren't any rules for that, and like you'd have to take like negatives and all of that. And I was like, cool, that's not how disability works at all. And it kind of made me realize that, wow, there is just nothing in terms of disability that's like actually reflective of how it works and how it is, and that's positive. And it really made me realize that I want to do something about this. That was during my first year at university, and I was still going through a lot of stuff personally, and then by my second year I got a bit more certain that like I want to do something like this. And then I had like a year out of university. I spent time finding people in the community who were also disabled, talking with them, and forging friendships with them. And then it led to my final year where I was like, okay, then I'm going to make this combat wheelchair, and it's going to be a thing, and it's going to, represent that kind of, there should be rules, positive, good rules for disabled characters. So I think I would put that down as a moment that really like taught me something. That, if I didn't homebrew it, that there wasn't going to be any rules for people like me. And like I felt, that was like really important. And it kind of set me on this path to like where I am now, really. So like I am grateful that like I had that moment of you can't play a disabled character because there's no rules for it, which like, it shouldn't have happened. Like games should have rules for disabled characters, but it was also like a kind of like big wake-up call to, hey, the community and the games are really lacking in this area and something should be done about it. So yeah, like I really put that down as a moment that like taught me something.
It's very... Oh, here I go again. It's very inspiring. It's a shame that the bad thing happened, but it's wonderful that you were able to take something really good out of it, and sort of this, well, from an outsider's perspective, looking at it, sort of the beginning of this, the sort of the FU sort of moment from your point of view, not taking any of this garbage, the idea that you couldn't play somebody who was disabled. And something that I think about a lot is, we've mentioned this already, the artwork that's in the Cyberpunk view in the little, well, the pretty big cyber chair, and the fact that you look like such a fucking boss on that chair, like so elegant and suave with this little like champagne glass in your hand with this sort of like grin on your face. Yeah, that's right, I'm here, come and fucking stop me.
It was so cool and like very touching when RTalsorian was like, we'd like to make the character your likeness. And, since like essentially that character, and by extension me, being canon in Cyberpunk, which I just think is great and hilarious. It's just wonderful and very surreal because that character's name is Nyx Phosphate, and I actually played them on a live streamed game, weekly live stream game, which was 6 sessions, and that was on Sirenscape, which you can look up. It's all up on YouTube now, all of the episodes. And it was with the Opera Geek, it was with Kelly, it was with Tanya, which is Cypher of Tyr on Twitter, and Gabe James Games. And Gabe was a delight as well. So like all of them were an absolute delight to play with. But yeah, getting my character like, canon in terms of Cyberpunk was also really cool.
I can only imagine what that feels like, because just check you out, just playing games with the tabletop celebrities. You kind of become one yourself, really, actually, when you think about it.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where like it's still like I feel uncomfortable, I think, with that kind of word used from like myself. I usually like tell people like I'm a person of interest in the community, or I'm just like someone with a big following in the community is usually how I refer to it. But I've had like people be like, oh, you're a celebrity in the tabletop community, or people like calling themselves fans and things, and it's something that I've had to like get used to. I don't think I ever will, but like it's something I've had to like get used to over essentially the past year.
Yeah, I can understand that. Like doing this podcast and the attention that's got, like knowing that people actually listen to what I do and they say that they are a fan of my work, I think that's a bit weird, personally.
Yeah, it's just strange to like hear it be like referred to as that, like out in the wild, basically. Yeah, it's just something like you kind of realize like how far your reach is just beyond your own computer and your close network of friends, and I think that's what's strange about it.
Yeah.
Is like not in a negative way. Like, you know, I don't tell people to not call themselves fans or anything. It's just like, it's just a very bizarre concept to me. Especially, I think it's because, like, I myself, I'm a fan of a lot of the big people in the tabletop community, and them actually, like, now following me and, like, me being brought onto things with them in is just something that I don't think I'll ever get used to. It's just very, surprising. And yeah, I just, it's so bizarre. Like, it's so hard to explain as well.
I can totally understand. I mean, similar with me, I have people who write the various World of Darkness books. They follow me on Twitter. I have like the Vampire the Masquerade and World of Darkness pages follow me, and I sometimes remember that when I write something that's just a little raunchy or just has a lot of swearing in it, and I think, these people follow me.
Yeah, I've done that. Yeah,
I just remember they know what they're getting into.
I've done that a good few times with Geralt of Rivia, only to have Doug Cockle like the tweet, and I'm like, oh, I forgot. You follow me. Like, I've had that a few times. Yeah, it's bizarre. It's always funny though, like, because like sometimes like they'll just like a random tweet, and it's like, why of all tweets did you have to see that one? You know, especially when it was just like a silly one. But yeah, it's just funny. Now it's like very surreal. But like, Twitter, for the most part, has been a really cool experience. The past year has been a really cool experience. It's definitely had its ups and downs. And I am looking forward to, you know, conventions being back on again, because I'm going to be at the UK Games Expo at the end of July, 31st of July. I'm going to, you know, get to meet some of these people that for like the past year I've only really known through Twitter because of lockdown. So it would be really nice and cool, I think, to get to see some people from the companies I've communicated with, or just people in general who are there, that I know or who know me. So I'm looking forward to that, at least.
That's good. And to wrap things up, where can people find you online if they want to see these particular spicy tweets or just the things that you're getting up to?
Mainly Twitter. Twitter is kind of where I, you know, update everything and talk about everything and link to things that I'm doing. My Twitter is at MustangSart, MustangSart. And for example, the combat wheelchair is in the pinned tweet. It takes you to a Google Drive document. Like, I promise, like, because people are like, oh, it takes you to like a Google Drive document. Should it do that? Yes, it does. It's a Google Drive document. It's entirely free. You don't have to pay for any of it. You can also, if you want behind the scenes content or early access to certain projects, usually like a week before they're actually released to everyone else, is to go to my Patreon, which is also Mustang's Art. And like £5, there's a £2 tier all the way up to I think a £15 tier. So, you know, each one gets you like a behind the scenes look at things, access to playtest materials, or just you know, information and work that I have been doing in personal projects, because obviously I can't release anything that I'm doing for companies. So yeah, it's all just like personal project stuff that you can check out, and message me on there about things if you want to. And yeah, I think that's about everything. There's also my business email in my Twitter profile. At the bottom is my Gmail address for work. You can email me there for business stuff, or you can also email me there if you want to send anything like post, and I'll give you my PO box address.
That's awesome. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, I will provide links all down in the description below, so I can sound a bit like a content creator for the change. And if you're coming onto this podcast through other means, not just my subscribers. If you do D&D stuff or whatever, I also provide my various links and stuff below, including my own homebrew, the Kindred wheelchair for Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, which again leads you to a Google Drive with 3 different versions, a PDF, an open dyslexic version, and just a plain Word document, which is the best version for screen readers, I was told. And I have nothing left to ask. We've run out of questions on the Discord server. Sarah, I just want to say again, thank you ever so much for taking time out of your busy day to ramble away with me about all things tabletop role-playing games and disability.
No, thank you for asking me to come on. It was nice just to chat about it in general.
Again, I'm very much appreciative. And for the listeners at home, until next time, farewell.